What if I told you there was an arcade game from the 1980s responsible for the deaths of multiple people? You probably wouldn't believe me, but what I'm about to present is information on the case of 3 young men who died in the presence of a simple arcade game with possibly the most menacing and sinister villain of all time. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the story of the killer video game, Berzerk. Before we begin, I want to thank today's sponsor, Keeps. There's only one thing scarier than killer video games, and that's premature hair loss. Did you know 2 out of 3 men will experience hair loss by the time they're 35? It's horrifying, I know, but with Keeps, you literally get to keep your hair. Not only do they offer personalized and doctor-recommended treatments to stop hair loss and improve hair growth, Keeps also gives you 24/7 support and delivers everything to your door. So whether you're looking to prevent hair loss, stimulate hair growth, or just take better care of your hair loss stops with Keeps. To get 50% off your first order, go to keeps.com/BillyStyler or click the link in the description. That's KEEPS.com/BillyStyler. Alright, let's take a trip back to 1980 for a moment. The arcade machines of the 1980s pioneered what we know gaming as today. From classics such as Pac-Man to Defender, every title you see here has left an impact on someone, one way or another. Although I personally wasn't around in the 80s, I've heard plenty of stories how the arcade was the go-to spot for children and teens all across urban North America back in the day. And one of the games they used to play was a title called Berzerk. Released in 1980 by Stern Electronics, Berzerk is a multi-directional shooter that gives the player an anxiety like no other. Using just a joystick and a firing button, the player must navigate a simple yet infinite maze packed with murderous robots. The goal is to achieve the highest score on the leaderboard as possible by shooting every robot in sight and progressing onwards. The player can then be killed in a variety of ways, but must do everything in their power to avoid the game's main villain, Evil Otto. The game was a challenge for many, as the difficulty grew the further you progressed. But Berzerk left a legacy as being one of the most iconic arcade titles, and was even one of the first games ever to use speech synthesis, making the experience all the more immersive. However, this game became a little too immersive for a few unfortunate individuals. Shortly after 8 p.m. on Saturday, April 3rd, 1982, 18-year-old Peter Bukowski died from a heart attack at Friar Tuck's game room in Calumet City, Illinois, just moments after achieving the high score on the arcade game, Berzerk. This was the first case in history of a person dying while playing a video game, and it was a strange one. Since Bukowski was a fit teenager, standing at 5'10" and weighing just over 170 pounds, there was no reason to suspect his death was caused from poor health. But the autopsy revealed that Peter actually had an undiagnosed myocardial condition, exposed from the abundance of scar tissue on his heart. However, this didn't stop people from suspecting that the game he was playing had something to do with it. Rumors quickly spread of Bukowski's sudden death. It was Berzerk, people thought. It had to be. These reports caused some arcade operators to even remove the game from their place of business, thus striking fear into the minds of children and parents alike. and that fear seemed to be justified. You see, Berzerk's concept becomes quite eerie when paired alongside Bukowski's death. The premise of the game involves you being relentlessly stalked by killer robots inside an infinite maze, controlled by a merciless and dimensional shifting smiley face. Then the entire time an enemy is on you, they constantly scream aggressive phrases, such as charge, attack, or kill, followed by the humanoid or the imposter. Was it just an odd coincidence that the game happened to announce Peter's death right before it actually happened? Most likely yes, but what makes things stranger from here is the town where the death occurred. Calumet City is host not to one, but to two water towers that share a striking resemblance to the villain of the game. But I think the most disturbing part of Berzerk is the manual from the Atari 2600 version of the game. You flee in panic because you know you cannot kill evil Otto, it reads, and that once he catches you, you'll never escape. He'll pound you to a lifeless pulp, grinning like a maniac all the while. Your only hope is to get out of the electrified maze before evil Otto catches you. If you do get out, you find yourself in another maze. Again, the faceless robots shoot at you, and again, evil Otto pursues you. Between the endless torment of the maze and the enigmatic nature of evil Otto, Berzerk becomes quite an unnerving experience, and when paired with a real death, evil Otto appears to be the most sadistic video game antagonist of all time, simply because he just smiles while watching you die. However, the story doesn't end here. The months following Bukowski's death, some new information was shared. Apparently on January 12th, 1981, a 19-year-old Virginian man named Jeffrey Daly died of a sudden heart attack moments after achieving a high score of 16,660 in Berzerk. This was a whole year and a bit before the Peter Bukowski incident, making it the first actual video game death. News of the story was being shared roughly 6 months following Peter's death, after being published in the now defunct gaming magazine, Video Ace. However, the authenticity of the story was sketchy at best. Unlike Bukowski, who had verifiable proof that his death occurred at the hands of Berzerk's joystick, Daly was an anomaly. People shared his death as if it was fact. There are records confirming that a 19-year-old Jeffrey Daly of Suffolk City, Virginia, died in a car accident on May 29, 1981, but nothing proving that this person died playing an arcade game. It's speculated that Daly was simply a copycat story based around Peter Bukowski, something someone just made up and eventually just took off by itself. Throughout the rest of the 1980s, rumors and urban legends surrounding Berzerk waned. But if the abundance of coincidences in the story weren't enough, there was one more death that took place back at Friar Tuck's arcade in Calumet City a few years later. On March 20th, 1988, Pedro Roberts stabbed and killed 17-year-old Edward Clark Jr. in the same place where Peter Bukowski died 6 years earlier. The story goes that Edward noticed some quarters sitting on Berzerk, but no one around to claim them, so he used one to play the game. But right after, Roberts stepped in and claimed that the money was his. This led to a fight and the eventual demise of Clark when the knife Roberts used lacerated his heart. Clark was murdered in the same arcade, in front of the same game, and suffered an attack to the heart, just like Bukowski did. Was this the work of something supernatural, or was his death, yet again, just another peculiar coincidence? Well, nothing notable has ever become of Berzerk since 1988. With the rise of home console ownership in the 1990s, arcades began to close all over the continent, leaving these cabinets as glorified dust collectors. It is possible the collapse of the arcade industry saved people of this generation from a tragic fate, or maybe everything surrounding Berzerk was just all a series of bizarre coincidences after all. Regardless of what it may be, the legend of Berzerk will forever go down in history as the first killer video game, and forever be dubbed as the Death Machine. But as always, thank you so much for watching, and good night.